recording here. Any questions before we start? Any questions? Okay. We are going to go right into garde manger. Okay. We will go into the garde manger. So, garde manger is, here we go. This is the NOA, the National Occupational Analysis, Block K, garde manger. The related products include salads, sandwiches, charcuterie, condiments and accompaniments. Condiments and accompaniments. Then you'll see here, there are 13 questions. Like most weeks, with the exception of last week, there was a lot more questions, but most weeks, 13 questions in that area. So we're going to look at 3 questions at prepared salads, prepared hors d'oeuvres, prepared sandwiches, charcuterie. Okay, we're going to focus on those 4. We're going to focus on those 4. And there'll also be a couple other points about condiments and accompaniments put in there, especially with the salads. So when we talk about prepared salads, salads are a combination of various ingredients such as vegetables, fruits, grains, pulses, meats, fish, shellfish, and cheese. They can be served hot or cold. I mean, hot salads are not really that, that really popular, but sometimes a hot salad would be like a wilted salad, where they cook something in a pan where they wilt a lettuce like spinach or something like that, or they heat up warm ingredients, or they accompany a warm piece of chicken with a salad. We're going to talk about dressings. Dressings add flavor, texture, appearance, and moisture to a salad. It is important to prepare most salads as close to serving time as possible. Okay, we will talk about that because it wilts, because the salad will wilt. Because the trends are, because of greater demand for cooks to be able to multitask, the definition of garde manger, obviously garde manger meaning the cold kitchen, has shifted from classic garde manger, which meant cold kitchen, to a broader range in duties, including hot and cold appetizers. And that's where the hors d'oeuvres come in and canapes. Convenience products are being increasingly used in the preparation of salads, hors d'oeuvres, sandwiches, pâtés, terrines, condiments, and accompaniments, and aspics and jellies and glazes. Cost efficiency and health and safety regulations are driving this trend. Charcuterie is being more and more popular. Okay, so I'll touch upon this. When it says convenient products are being increasingly used in the preparation of salads, that means obviously you can get a much more wider range of prepared salads, already like mesclun mix, perfect example, or something like that, romaine that's already cut, iceberg that's already cut or shredded or something like that. So prepared salads, certainly prepared dressings, much more popular, more healthier versions out there too. Hors d'oeuvres, there's a lot more readily prepared hors d'oeuvres. Some companies do fresh, but a lot of frozen. There's sandwiches. I wouldn't say there are prepared sandwiches, especially like something like a tea sandwich. But when we look at the pâtés, terrines, and the condiments, there are those that are readily made, like a chicken liver pâté, something like that. However, the pâtés and terrines are sort of an old school method. They're old school sort of hotel, way of serving. I'm not sure I'm saying this properly, but anyways, I don't think it's not really a trend anymore to serve like a pâté en croûte, and we'll talk about that. It's pâté and pastry. Chicken liver is still popular, but like a venison terrine or a venison pâté, something like that, I don't think is as popular as it once was. You know what? Same with aspics and jellies too. Okay, charcuterie is becoming more popular because it is trendy. As we mentioned a little bit last week, is that what is trendy is sort of what they call nose to tail. Using the whole animal, getting the whole animal and breaking it down and using scraps for charcuterie, salami, sausages, something like that. So anyways, here's prepared salads and where you'll find information on the slides. What I want to look at down here, we're going to look at emulsions. We're going to look at temporary emulsions and permanent emulsions. When we're talking about emulsions, we're going to focus on the dressings. We're going to focus on dressings, vinaigrettes, and like a mayonnaise-based dressing. We're going to look at all this. That's what we're looking at right now. 3 questions on salads and 2 questions on hors d'oeuvres in this PowerPoint. So again, the garde, because of the tradition of garde dates back to age before refrigeration, it encompasses many classical techniques for preparing and preserving food. In the modern culinary arts, the term garde can refer to the chef who oversees the cold food production. So garde is part of the French brigade system. The garde, the chef garde, part of the French brigade system that usually takes place in bigger establishments, really the hotels, big banquet halls, cruise ships, stuff like that. Similarly, garde can also refer to the specific area of the kitchen where cold food production takes place. The garde has the greatest diversity of skills, and we'll talk about some of that. But basically, before refrigeration, they had to do something with the food. So what they did, they preserved it, they cooked it, something like that. So thinking back then, problems we have now and in restaurants, and before then, they didn't even have refrigeration. So in a restaurant, you know, like it's sort of, anyways, any sort of, you know, mid-level, higher-end restaurant, the garde would be responsible for salads, cold soups in the summer, like cold appetizers, for example, like smoked salmon or oysters, carpaccio, or that tartare, you know, that's what the garde. But then you go to a hotel and they have all those same ingredients that would be at the restaurant, but they would also do a bigger variety of salads for banquets and buffets. Obviously, terrines, they would look after, the garde would look after all the sandwiches, all the cheese, like cheese boards. A lot of times I worked at a couple big hotels and one of them did all the fruit and then the other one, the pastry department, did all the fruit. But I think, yeah, usually like fruit presentations, fruit platters, buffet setup, pickling food, cold meats, ice carvings, all that sort of stuff. And then you get to banquets, a lot of similar stuff, you know, all the cold appetizers, salads, fruits, canapes. There we go. So we'll look at the salad dressings, okay? Most of the basic salad dressings used today can be divided into 3 categories. There's a basic oil and vinegar, right? The basic oil and vinegar. That's a most unthickened dressings. The ratio, which I know I have in one of the slides coming up, but your basic, for your oil and vinegar dressings, the basic ratio is usually 3 parts oil to 1 part vinegar. Now this depends on the type of oil you're using. If you're using a canola oil, the basic vegetable oil, canola oil, or you're using an olive oil, type of vinegar you're using a really strong acidic vinegar. So, but basically what's what they say, 3 parts oil, 1 part vinegar. And then obviously the most important thing with that is to taste it for the balance, right? Then the second basic salad dressing is a mayonnaise-based dressing, right? Most of the thick in dressings, okay? The mayonnaise is also known as an emulsified dressing. So the mayonnaise dressing, and then there's lots of mayonnaise dressings. They can sort of veer off to a lot of other types of dressings, right? You know, for instance, like a ranch dressing, a Caesar salad dressing, something like that. And then there are cooked dressings, okay? Similar in appearance to a mayonnaise dressing, but a bit more tart with little or no content, right? A cooked dressing could be something like a tomato dressing where you cook it out, okay? But here's something that you want to study for the exam. The 2 types of emulsions. There are temporary emulsions. Temporary emulsions are a vinaigrette, where if you make a vinaigrette, you use 3 parts oil, 1 part vinegar. You put a bit of mustard in there. You know, you whisk it up, season up a bit of salt and pepper. You might put a shallot in there, or a little chopped shallot, or some, you know, or some garlic or something like that. You whisk it up. There's a chance it'll emulsify. It'll come together, right? It'll stabilize. But it's called a temporary emulsion because it's not really held together, and it will separate. Sometimes it will, sometimes it won't. Depending on how you serve your dressings where you are, maybe they might be in a squirt bottle, something like that, or you're having a container with a ladle. You know what? You obviously want to mix them up together so the oil and vinegar balances. Otherwise, the oil will separate to the top. And then we have the permanent emulsions. The permanent emulsions are most thickened dressings, okay? A permanent emulsion is a uniform mixture of two liquid normally unmixable. So basically it's two liquids. One liquid suspends into another. So with that in mind, the most popular permanent emulsion would be a mayonnaise, okay, where the egg yolk is suspended into the oil, okay. Another common permanent emulsion dressing is a hollandaise sauce too, hollandaise sauce. So there you go. So that's I would certainly remember emulsions, temporary and permanent. Okay, so we'll look at some ingredients here. Oils, all-purpose oils for the dressing should have mild, sweet flavor. Even a hint of rancidity, meaning it's bad, can ruin the entire batch of dressing. Okay, strongly flavored oils can make excellent salad dressings, but are not appropriate with every food. Okay, so the key with if your oil is rancid, I think oil usually has a pretty good shelf life. One of the ways it will get rancid if it's not rotated, first in, first out. When they talk about strong flavored oils, that means primarily I'm thinking it really focuses on olive oil. Okay, I mean there are some pretty strong olive oils out there, but they might be too harsh to serve with. Too strong, not harsh, too strong, harsh is the wrong word, too strong to serve with a salad. And also, so if you want a salad, use a lighter type of oil. And also some of those olive oils are very expensive. I don't know if you want to serve it, serve it. My opinion, I like some olive oils, but I use a lighter olive oil if you make it with a dressing. But also, the majority of dressings would be made with a vegetable oil or canola oil, okay? So, dressings ingredients, we look at oil, vinegar, seasonings and flavors. That could be the herbs, spices, cheese. You want to put, maybe some people put onions and garlic in there. And then again, the ratio basic vinegar, it is 3 parts oil, 1 part vinegar. But it depends on the strength of the acidity of the vinegar. And it also depends on how strong your oil is too, but mostly the vinegar. And there's a list of type of oils there. There's a list. I don't think they're going to ask you that, but you know what? There's a bunch of lists of different oils. I suggest obviously sticking with a unsaturated oil, something that's vegetable oil. I mean, obviously olive oil is olive, but like a sunflower oil or safflower oil, But the vegetable oil is the best, low cost, okay? Then here's a list of vinegars, different types of vinegars. I think the trendy one now, the most popular is like an apple cider vinegar. It's good for you, good for your health, good for your digestive, okay? But, sort of classic old school way thinking is usually white wine vinegar or red wine vinegar. There's lots of it. Balsamic vinegar too. There's a lot of different types of balsamic, and same with sherry, depending on how aged it is. It will depend on how expensive it is. Lemon juice can be certainly used in a dressing. Either lemon, you just use lemon and olive oil, maybe some Dijon mustard, or you can always use lemon at the very sort of to add to your dressing. Certainly you would probably add lemon or some type of acidity to a thickened dressing, like a mayonnaise dressing, to bring it out, give it some acidity, And then the egg yolk is an essential ingredient in the mayonnaise and other emulsified dressings. Okay, nearly any herb or spice could be used. It just depends on what you're making and what it's going to go with, right? Obviously, dried herbs and spices need extra time to release their flavors if they are not heated in the product. So if you add dried rosemary to some sort of dressing, I'm not sure, to a vinaigrette or something like that, it just needs some extra time. Just always be careful. Dried herbs are more strong, more potent than fresh herbs, okay? There we go. There's another slide on emulsification, emulsified in salad dressings. Again, the definition is, which I remember, a uniform mixture of 2 unmixable liquids. That is called an emulsion. One liquid is suspended in the other. Then we go, there's your temporary emulsions again. A simple oil and vinegar dressing is called temporary emulsion. The 2 liquids always separate after being shaken or beaten together. The vinegar sometimes is broken into little tiny droplets. Okay. The harder the mixture is beaten or shaken, the longer it takes to separate. Mayonnaise, there's your mayonnaise right there. Mayonnaise is also a mixture of oil and vinegar. The two liquids do not separate. Now, saying that, it doesn't separate if it's made correctly, right? I think if anyone's made a mayonnaise, you add the oil too fast, it will separate, okay? It will separate. Same with the hollandaise sauce too, eh? So there we go. A bit more about the 3-to-1 ratio. Okay. Here we go. Mayonnaise is the most important emulsified dressing. Often it is served as the base for a wide variety of other dressings like Thousand Islands, Caesar, the blue cheese dressing. So, however, homemade mayonnaise is not as stable as commercial product. Okay. Why is that? A lot of times homemade, or sorry, a lot of times, here's the thing. If you go to the grocery store and you look at mayonnaises, okay, you go to the grocery store, you look at mayonnaises, some of them, there's certainly, okay, first of all, there's so many different types. There's a light mayonnaise, a low-fat mayonnaise, there's an olive oil mayonnaise, or an avocado oil mayonnaise, and all this other stuff. You know, like a light dressing reduced or whatever mayonnaise. There's all these different types. And honestly, the more different spins that are put on the label, the more different spins, you know, whether it's low fat, low calorie, whatever, the more ingredients are in there. And a lot of times, a lot of those ingredients are stabilizers. Okay. I think if I buy mayonnaise for my house, I want to have probably 4 ingredients. You want your eggs, you want your oil, you want some acid in there too, you know, and maybe something else, or maybe a couple other ingredients, really. But really, mayonnaise is eggs and oil. You know, eggs and oil. People put Dijon in there because it helps emulsify. People obviously put salt in there. They put some acid in there, like lemon juice or vinegar, something like that. That's what I think, anyways. But, however, we'll talk about this. This is going to apply when we talk about sandwiches. If you make sandwiches, and certainly you make a sandwich and it's going to be for a banquet or a buffet or something like that, I highly suggest you use a mayonnaise with pasteurized eggs. Okay, it'll give you a bit better shelf life, a little bit better shelf life. Like the Hellmann's. You know what? I used to buy Hellmann's and it has pasteurized eggs. Okay, homemade mayonnaise is not as stable because the eggs are not pasteurized. It's very temperamental. If you put it out where people get their condiments, you must have it on ice. Okay, or else mayonnaise will start to get a skin on there. It'll start to change color and it'll start to separate. And also a lot of bacteria. So yeah, so you make your tuna salad sandwich. You want to eat it. Your tuna salad or your egg salad, something a mayonnaise-based sandwich. Yeah, you're gonna want to eat that within a couple hours, right? So there are ways to correct a broken mayonnaise. There's 2 ways. One of them is to first of all, one way is to start over. Another way is to obviously you can just whisk warm water, maybe a couple tablespoons of warm water, and slowly try to, or you can do this in the food processor or your mixer, your KitchenAid or a Hobart mixer. You want to take some warm water, just tap warm water, and then, you know, a couple tablespoons, and then slowly add the separated mayonnaise in there. And now it's the exact same as the hollandaise. Like hollandaise, you can do that too. Or you start over, right? And then again, you know what? Homemade mayonnaise is better. I think it's got better flavor. It's fresher. There's certainly a lot less ingredients. However, it is time consuming. It can be dangerous if it's not refrigerated and stored properly. Yeah, there's time consuming labor. So it's much more convenient to buy whatever you need. Depends how big a place where you work. You know, you might buy 4-liter jugs of Hellmann's or maybe 16-liter jugs. Depends on how big it is. Okay. And I think canola oil is the best use for mayonnaise. Okay. Sometimes a little bit of olive oil if it's aioli, which is a garlic-based mayonnaise. Okay. So here I'm going to show you a bunch of slides. I'm going to show you a bunch of slides on lettuces, but I'm just going to skip through the different types, because it can get, but I just put a lot of these in just for your own interest, right? But we're going to talk about the characteristics of lettuce. So the flavor profile of lettuces are important. You know, you want your characteristics, your texture. You want the lettuce to be crisp, okay? You want it to be crisp always. That means you don't want it to sit out at room temperature too much. You don't want to wash it too far in advance. Okay, you want to make sure you spin it to get the water out of there. You know, some types of lettuce are bitter, like escrow, Belgium endive, something like that. Arugula is a little bitter, a little peppery, radicchio too. Okay, so some people use sprouts right there in the bottom, sort of bottom right. They use that for decor, sprouts or seedlings, something like that. They use that to give a little color to a plate. Okay, it can be expensive though too. Okay, combination of lettuces like a mesclun mix will create a nice balance of the bitter lettuces. Okay, so basically we have two types of lettuce. We have bitter lettuces and sweet lettuces. We went over the bitter ones, are escrow, Belgium endive. Here's the radicchio here. You know, arugula. Arugula is bitter. Radicchio, okay, stuff like that. They are bitter lettuces. So then you have like a sweet lettuce. A sweet lettuce would be like Boston Bib, romaine, iceberg. They're sweet. So it's nice to have a mixture of them if you're making a basic salad, a mesclun mixed salad or a spring mixed salad. Excuse me. It's good for the color. Certain lettuces have all different colors. The radicchio is certainly nice for the red. Okay. So we're going to look at the storage and handling. Okay. So as I've mentioned, I'm sure many times when we've talked about cross-contamination, you know, you want to wash in clean, cold water, okay? Clean, cold water, and you also really want to make sure your sink is clean, okay? Processing gently, gentle. The lettuce is gentle, fragile. You want to be careful with it. And when you spin it in a salad spinner, you want to be gentle with it too, okay? So that's why with some convenience products, you know, you get your mesclun mix in, or sometimes you get your romaine in. You look at the box and it probably might say triple washed. If it says triple washed, then you're pretty well good to go, right? Just remember, any type of lettuce has a short shelf life, okay? If you wash your lettuces, you want to make sure you put it in a container with a damp cloth and there's air circulation too, okay? And again, convenience products, the pre-processed products, you know, are available in the store, washed and all ready to go. And a lot of times that really is so convenient, especially with larger functions. Okay. However, you've got to order the pre-processed more often, more frequently, because of the short shelf life. If you wash your lettuces, then you make sure that you only wash what you need. It's like, I think what I mentioned last week with the fish, you know, if you have a whole salmon in there, you only need whatever, a couple portions or something like that. Don't portion the whole thing, you know, cut your salmon up, but leave, I think I was mentioning this last week, you know, leave it obviously as whole as possible, even if it's just a side. Well, it's the same as the lettuce, right? You know, if you went and processed all your lettuce today on a Thursday, and you say, okay, I'm going to process all my lettuce and it's going to get me through till Sunday. Well, you know what? That's like 4 days away, right? So you got Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It's better to maybe do it in 2-day batches, okay? 2-day batches, because at the end of the day, if lettuce sits around in the fridge for 4 days, yeah, it's going to, even if it's been washed, it's going to start sort of wilting a little bit, deteriorating, going brown. And there's nothing, for me, more frustrating is when you have to pick through lettuce because there's little brown bits kicking through, you know, just because the lettuce is old or it's sat at room temperature too long or something like that. And you have to pick through, you know, even 10%, but maybe even 30 or 40%, pick through those brown parts, or the parts are a little bit brown, a little kind of slimy. You want to get rid of that because you certainly don't want to serve that to a customer. Okay. So there are some different types of presentations on the menus. You have appetizer salad, accompaniment salads, main course salads are more and more main course salads are more and more popular, especially at lunch now. People want to eat a salad. They want to eat a salad with lettuce. We'll talk about garnishes and vegetables. They might, you know, you obviously want something in accompaniment, like a protein, like a chicken or a fish or steak or something like that. They want to eat healthier, okay? And then you have dessert salad, right? Dessert salad, what's that? That would be fruit, right? There we go. Here's where we're going to get into a lot of the slides about the things, but you know, a lot of the structure of the salad would be your base, right? Your base of salad that you're going to put it on there. What kind of greens are you going to do that? Okay. Or what is the main part of the salad? So we could say, well, what could we say here? We could say something so simple like a Caesar salad, right? Your base or your body is obviously the romaine. The garnish, the garnish for the classic garnish for the Caesar salad would be obviously your bacon, your croutons, possibly your anchovies. Someone might put something else in there, like some, vegetable chips, beet chips, or something like that. Or they might put some pickled vegetables, kind of whip it up a bit. Or they could add protein, like chicken, Caesar salad with chicken. And then the dressing, obviously your mayonnaise based thick dressing with lots of garlic in there. That's one thing. Or you might sell a lot of, like I said, a lot of people like composed salads, main course salads, so they might want a green salad with chicken breast. So your base or your body would be whatever type of greens you're using. Let's say you're using spinach, or let's say you're using a mesclun mixed salad. Your garnish and your protein could be endless. Like I said chicken, greens, but it could be salmon, it could be beef tenderloin if you want, or it could be whatever, some cured meats or something like that. And the garnishes could be endless. There's endless possibilities. You could have fresh vegetables, like cooked. You could have cooked vegetables, carrots, beans, something like that. You could have pickled vegetables. Pickled vegetables again, like cucumbers or beans, pickled beans or pickled beets. Pickled beets would be nice, something like that. Fresh vegetables. It's just garnish. And then garnishes too. Obviously nuts, seeds, something deep fried again, like chips, like beet chips or something like that. So anyways, and then you have the dressing. The dressing for that could be a basic vinaigrette. So okay. Then we could look at other types of vegetables. We looked 2 weeks ago, we looked at grains, and legumes. So a lot of those could be a good base for a salad. You know what? You go back here, right? Your base could be your basic greens. Let's say spinach salad. Your base can be spinach salad. And then the body is going to be, let's say you're going to do something vegetarian, something plant-based. You could do a black bean salad, or you could do pasta salads, stuff like that. So it is very, very versatile. Here are probably your most popular, obviously. Iceberg lettuce could be one of the most popular lettuces. It also is probably the most unhealthy lettuce because it is all water. So if you could try to bump up to romaine, but however, there's a big price difference. Your Boston Bib, hydroponically grown. Your Boston or your Bib lettuce is all usually hydroponically grown. Your loose leaf red lettuce. Escargot is a bitter lettuce. Hickory or curly endive, another bitter one. And frisee is a little bit bitter, but there's blonde frisee and green frisee. And then I'm going to kind of skip through the rest of these. You probably notice a lot of these. Some of these here are good for color. Obviously these two, the Lolo Rosso, the red oak. Go back here. Arugula has become quite popular too. And then there's some other ones. And here we go. So if you want to look at what kind of vegetables can I put with my salad, what kind of vegetables can I put? Well, there's, like I said, it is endless, the endless of what you want to put here. Some of these vegetables here could be fresh. Some could be canned or pickled. Certainly artichoke hearts can be canned in water or canned and pickled. Same with beets. Same with corn too. All these hearts of palm. Lots of this stuff. Or you can serve these fresh yourself. The leeks, something like the leeks, is something that's be a nice garnish if it's deep fried. The olives are good, but I would try to use a pitless olive. Okay, a pitless olives. Peas. There's a variety of different peas out there. Even edamame beans, stuff like that, and so on and so on and so forth. Okay. We could. You know what? I'm not going to read this. Actually, this is something I put in there about plate presentation. Okay, and then really something my sort of philosophy is, I think all plates have rims. If you look at the rim of the plate, and the rim usually sort of stands out from the base of the plate, and I always look at the rim, and then I go about one width of my finger, about 1 inch inside the rim. I just try to keep things inside the rim nice and neat. Always make sure the plates always make sure the plates are not overcrowded, that they're clean, the plates, the rims are clean. So, you know, you can put height on there, color, that's sort of everything else. A bit more about the plate presentation. And is that a question? Okay. There's a lot on there. Okay, so that is the salads. So we'll go into hors d'oeuvres in a second. Does anyone have any questions? Oh, okay, we'll talk about the hors d'oeuvres then. So this is from the National Occupational Analysis, the context. Cooks prepare hot and cold bite-sized items in quantity. They are made with various ingredients such as meat, vegetables, fruit, and bread. So there's your required knowledge. There's your required knowledge. Okay. One thing I put in there too, obviously holding temperatures and storage methods. And then I think it's very important to avoid presenting hot and cold items. And we're talking about hors d'oeuvres and canapes, hot and cold on the same tray, right? I would mix it up. You know, if you're going to put 3 or 4 different types of hors d'oeuvres on a tray and you're going to leave it there, right? We'll talk about that butler style, buffet style. We'll talk about that in a few slides. But I would just make sure if a tray's got cold, it's all cold. If the hors d'oeuvres are hot, you can put them on a tray, but I would recommend maybe a chafing dish. And then again, the danger zone. Don't leave food in the danger zone more than 2 hours. We'll look at some garnishes. So here we go, hors d'oeuvres. The garde pantry. Some people call the garde pantry. In England, I worked in England, they called it the larder. It took me like months to get used to that word. But anyways, some people call it the pantry. Some people call it the larder. But let's just keep the garde. The garde department is generally responsible for the small food items known as appetizers or hors d'oeuvres. The function of these foods is to enliven the appetite before dinner, often to accommodate accompaniment of drinks, so they are generally small in size and sometimes I say spicy. Okay, so if someone's having alcohol before dinner, it's always good that they have a little bit of food with that, right? It's always good to have a little bit of food like that just to keep things from getting out of control. So anyways, the 2 most common ways of serving hors d'oeuvres are the butler style and the buffet style. So the butler style are hors d'oeuvres selections that are often offered to guests by service staff carrying small trays as they pass among the assembled group. So that's passing. So they're passing. So a waiter or waitress is out there with a tray passing around, you know, whatever, cheese puffs and smoked salmon and, you know, bruschetta and stuff like that. So then there's the buffet style, which hors d'oeuvres are arranged attractively on 1 or more tables and the guests help themselves. You know, the guests, or you can have a combination of both. You know, you could have a buffet style of hors d'oeuvres might include some station food, you know, might not all be hors d'oeuvres. It could be some cheese platters, fruit platters, crudité and dip or something like that. So, okay, a canapé may be defined as a bite-sized open-faced sandwich. Canapes are perhaps the most traditional and also the most modern of the hors d'oeuvres. Okay. Most canapes consist of 3 parts: your base, your spread, and your garnish. So your base, the canapé, your base could be a lot of times, and here's where it's probably not as popular as it was at least 5 or 10 years ago because of the gluten, because of people's gluten intolerance, is the base is I would say mostly, you know, mostly could be bread, right? So your base would be, let's say, a piece of a crostini. So a piece of toasted bread. Your spread could be like, let's say, cream cheese, and your garnish could be like sauteed mushrooms. Or your base could be a piece of pumpernickel bread. The spread could be, I don't know, some dill cream cheese or something like that. And your garnish could be smoked salmon, something like that. Other bases that are not gluten-free could be like a cucumber round, or a cucumber cup that's been scooped out with a melon baller. Could be a piece of Belgian endive, the lettuce with something in there, you know, stuff like that. Or could be It could be a piece of cucumber that's like a baton with a piece of smoked salmon wrapped around it, stuff like that. So that is the canopy. Okay, that is the canopy. Obviously, again, most of them are considered bite-sized open-faced sandwich, but in today's world, a lot of people have allergies. Not allergies. Some do actually have allergies to gluten, but I think a lot more of it is intolerance. Okay, so canopy bases may be made from several ingredients: bread cutouts, toasted cutouts, crackers, Melba toast, or tiny unsweetened pastry shells. You know, like a short dough or a phyllo dough or some other type of pastry. Remember, these are only 1 or 2 bites. 1 or 2 bites, right? So then the spread may be as simple as a butter or softened cream cheese, right? It is better to use a more highly flavorful spice, right? And that's not all about salt. You want to put some other ingredients in there too. Sharp or spicy flavors are better for stimulating the appetite, okay? The spread should be thick enough to cling well to the base so the garnish sticks to it without falling off, okay? Because you have to keep in mind that, again, if this is at a reception, people obviously they have a drink in one hand and they only have one other hand to eat the food. That's why it's 1 or 2 bites, and they don't want something spilling on their suit or their dress or anything like that, and they also don't want it spilling on their pants or on the floor. Well, actually, I guess they don't care about if it spills on the floor, really. So spreads may be divided into 3 basic categories as followed. You have flavored butters, flavored cream cheese, and then you have meat or fish salad spreads. So obviously flavored butters, we go back to sauces and stuff. They can be as simple as a compound butter, right? That would be a soft butter with, you know, numerous amounts of types of fillings in there. Compound butter, you could have like a grain mustard compound butter, you know, something like that. You could have a basil compound butter, you know, and we're going to look, this is going to go hand in hand, the compound butters, when we start talking about sandwiches. And same with the spreads too, right? Flavored cream cheese, depending on what you're serving it with. You're serving with fish or smoked salmon or something like that. You know, dill would go nice, horseradish. And then the types of meat or fish salad spreads would be, like meat would make a nice spread is something like a chicken liver spread, chicken liver mousse or parfait or something like that. Fish could be like a smoked trout mousse, you know, for example. And then some popular and versatile flavors for butter spreads include, and there's all sorts here, right? Just depending on what you're doing. And this, excuse me for yawning. This could also be for sandwiches, for the most part too. For the most part, for sandwiches, unless you're doing a really high end thing, I would stay away from maybe the caviar and the shrimp. But anyways, so the garnish of a canopy is any food item or combination of items placed on top of the spread. It may be the major part of the canopy. It may be a small tidbit. Select for color, design, texture, or flavored accent. If it's the majority part of it, it could be the majority, as I mentioned, the mushrooms or the smoked salmon, or, you know, a little piece of shrimp or something like that. Or if it's just a small tidbit, it could be a little garnish, like a seedling. Okay. And here are some garnishes. Okay. Food items that may be used alone or in combination to decorate canopies could be. Now remember, again, so these are small bites, 1 to 2 bites per person. And, you know, so these have to be small pieces, right? So you look at all this stuff, especially pickled onions, something pickled like that, that's going to be strong, something that's oniony, you know, the cherry tomatoes, they have to be small pieces, cucumbers. Okay. Food items that may be used alone or in combination of fish. You know, you have all this smoked oysters, smoked salmon, smoked trout, herring, shrimp, okay, caviar, crab meat, all sorts of stuff. You have also tartare. I didn't put tartare in there, you know, like tuna tartare or something like that. Other fish could be like sashimi from like the raw fish that would be used in sushi. Carpaccio, where they take a piece of fish and they sear it, so it's just the outside seared and the rest is raw. Food items that may be used alone in combination to decorate the canopies, and meat. Obviously, we're looking ham and salami, chicken or turkey breast, Smoked tongue. That's pretty old school. Smoked tongue. The tongue is actually, a tongue is from a cow, by the way, and it's smoked. Roast beef. Something that charcuterie would be big on here. Charcuterie, even little tiny, finely slices of beef, like the ham could be, the charcuterie could be like prosciutto or something like that, or capicola, sort of salamis. Then other ones, cheese, hard cooked egg slices. There's not much, actually. I don't really, unfortunately, I should have more vegetarian here. So, but I have some towards the end. I think it's the very last slide. I have some stuff on vegetarians for hors d'oeuvres. Okay. So the miscellaneous hors d'oeuvres, a great variety of other foods, both hot and cold, can be served with hors d'oeuvres. Finger food is much easier for guests who are likely to be standing and holding a wine glass or a cocktail glass while eating. If hors d'oeuvres are to be served away from the dinner table, it is best they can be eaten with the fingers or speared with a pick. Okay, so what is wrong with this, or what is not modern day? What is not modern day with this? I'm not really taking it. I'm not sure, first of all, how long it's going to be until we start doing more receptions, hors d'oeuvre receptions, even functions of that matter. I'm not sure. Even when there's a virus, when everyone gets vaccinated, and the virus started to go its way, I'm not sure how many people will be wanting to go to a reception, especially if it's a large reception, right? And that's the same, you could say that for like sports and other sort of, big places where a lot of people. So, and then the other thing too is, are people going to want to eat food off a tray when someone's passing it around? You have a server, right? You have a waiter or waitress passing around a tray hors d'oeuvres, right? Which is called the butler, right? The butler's, service. So you have someone passing that around. And first of all, people are taking their hands and they're putting in there. Also, this, if people aren't wearing masks, well, how are you going to eat your food with a mask? If the server's not wearing a mask, if someone sees someone picking up something with their hands, are they wondering, did they just open the door with their hand and not wash it or not sanitize it? So it's just a conversation. I'm just thinking, in this day and age, there's so much to think about. Especially right here, right now. There aren't going to be any receptions, right? But eventually there will be. And the thing you have to think about, and which is what hurts our industry, is when is it going to go back to normal where people aren't afraid to go to a wedding of 50 people or 200 people or 500 people? When are people not? That is something that I don't know. I think that's going to take a while. I think people might never, some people certainly, without a doubt, I'm going off topic here, but it affects our industry, is that for sure. I think that you'll still see forever. You'll still see people, and it might be a small minority of a small minority of people will still wear masks outside. And I think people think twice before going to an event like a wedding, or before people go to a football game or a hockey game or something like that, where you're sitting in there. So you're inside. So that's what I think. Anyways, that just affects our industry, which is unfortunate. So some other types of miscellaneous hors d'oeuvres. We have antipasto, which is antipasto is an Italian cuisine, which is particularly rich in hors d'oeuvres or antipasto. And what happens in our antipasto varies. There's cured meats, seafood items, cheeses. Okay, could be stuffed eggs. There's something pickled, obviously, got a relish, or mushrooms on there, beans, could be some cooked chickpeas with with some other sort of garnishes in there, or vinaigrette dressing or something like that. So another Italian hors d'oeuvre, the bruschetta, right? Very, very popular in the 1980s, from what I remember, anyways, when I was young. But anyways, I think it sort of started veering out in the 1990s, but it's still popular. It's still popular. Unfortunately, it's all on bread, but and there's lots of different types, varieties of bruschetta. The spanakopita, the savory Greek pie made of layers of phyllo pastry, and the fillings most times is spinach and feta cheese, but some other people put other stuff in there like sauteed mushrooms, stuff like that. So that's spanakopita, served hot. Tapas, Spanish tapas, right? A small food item intended to be eaten with wine or other drinks, usually in taverns and bars. The Spanish term literally means lid. The original tapas It's thought to be a small bit of food, perhaps a slice of cured ham placed on top of a glass of sherry. So again, this, I mean, the tapas, you know, it has to do small food, eating while you drink, soaking up the alcohol. Caviar, okay. In the United States and Canada, any product labeled simply caviar must come from the sturgeon, okay? And this Canada produces a fair amount of sturgeon, especially in the east coast of Canada. I mean, it's farmed, but it's, you know, opposed, it's not all from the Caspian Sea and then Iran or outside Iran or sorry, or Russia. Sorry, Russia's. I think that's where it is. But you know what? Obviously, caviar is the salted roe or eggs of the sturgeon. If you get roe from anywhere else, like if you go for sushi and you see, I think it's the California roll, it has something that resembles the middle one here. The middle one here, that's just known as roe. Okay, it's known as roe. It can't be called caviar. There's a name that some people call it the whitefish caviar, but there you go. Just for your reference, I don't think this will be on here, but those are the most expensive. Beluga is the most expensive caviar. Then there's Osietra, which is the middle one, and then Sevruga. Okay. We're going 2 more slides left. So sometimes if you go to a high-end fancy restaurant, you know what, or it could be even a function, a buffet or something like that, they give you what's called an amuse-bouche, which is a tiny appetizer or hors d'oeuvre offered to the guests seated at their tables. Okay, so this is not the amuse-bouche. This is not an hors d'oeuvre that's either passed, you know, like butler style, or served as a buffet, you know, put down on a platter. This is something where you're sitting down to dinner and you usually get something that's compliments of the chef. You know, usually in more expensive restaurants, it is offered either before or after they have ordered their menu. Okay, it's just something, an opportunity for the chef or the sous chef or whoever to show off their style and talent and welcome. And people think, oh, I'm getting something for free. Oh yes, yeah, I guess you are, but I guess if they look at the price point of the other stuff or the bottle of wine you order or something like that, then it might not be. So, and nearly anything can be served in a tiny portion. Okay, we call it a amuse-bouche. There we go. And here are certainly some hors d'oeuvres that I have used in the past, and especially, you know, I started breaking them down years ago. I started breaking them down as like plant-based, vegetarian, and then ones from the ocean, fish, shellfish, and then farm, which is obviously protein-based, chicken, beef, lamb, something like that, and then sweet ones too. Okay, sweet ones, especially the sweet ones could be used as a dessert table. So, and then more and more, as things gone on, I always made sure, see the GF there, that means gluten-free. So always, you know what, people more and more these days, they want more vegetarian and they want more gluten-free. Okay, as the joke goes, how do you know who the gluten-free vegetarian is at the hors d'oeuvre reception? Because it's the one that doesn't shut up about it and telling people. Right? They're probably, a lot of times they're the more vocal people. And at the end of the day, as I mentioned before, they're the ones that drive the bus, man. They say, no, we can't go to this restaurant because I don't like the gluten-free. They don't have many gluten-free options. So there, you know, I put the gluten-free, something like that on there. Or the V here for vegan, you know, gluten-free, vegan, stuff like that. So anyways, it is what we have to do in these days and these times. So there we go. Any questions? Nothing? Okay, we could keep going. Yeah. Okay. There we go. I think how many people we have here today? Okay, I think everyone's here. No, I think someone's missing. That's okay though. I dare ever also to remind you again, since we are week 7, if you want the recordings, you let me know and I can give you I can't remember the woman's name at the point, but because what I found out a few weeks ago is that the recordings are only good for 7 days. Okay, they're only good for 7 days. So, okay, so we will look at sandwiches next. Okay, here we go. We are going to look at, scroll down, sandwiches. Okay, is our required knowledge. So sandwiches, some of the stuff will overlap from when we talked about the canapes. The composition of a sandwich is, most times, it's the bread, then your spread, and then your filling. Obviously, fillings, meat, poultry, fish, cheese, vegetarian. Okay. So we talked a little bit about bread before. I think it was, I can't remember which week. But anyways, good quality breads provide a variety of texture and flavor. It gives eye appeal to sandwiches as well as bulk and nutrients to the sandwich. Choosing the proper bread depends mostly on the choice of the filling. So you leave some bread here, you know, if you want to be classic, you know, you look at the one in the middle, looks like a marble rye. You know, what is that normally served with? Or down to the bottom here are rye breads, you know, served with, you know, like corned beef or pastrami or something like that. You know, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the bread, a bit more actually, and we'll go through the sandwich types. Best case, you get the bread in every day. Okay, that's the best case. You get the bread in every day. However, if you're making a lot of sandwiches, you get the bread in every day. I mean, you get big sandwich functions, then you increase the bread order, obviously, like that. But if the bread gets a day old, it should be fine, right? As long as it's covered up. You must cover the bread up. You know, put it back in the saran wrap or put it in a container because you don't want air to get at it. If you keep the bread away from air, oxygen, it'll be much better the next day than if you just left it out on the table. If you leave it out on the table, you're going to start to be making croutons. So, or you can go the route of frozen bread. You know, there's a lot of good types of frozen bread. Some that you just pull right out, put on a tray to defrost, or some that are actually par baked, where they're like 3/4 cooked. You put them in the oven for another, 8 minutes or something like that. So there's a lot of variety depending on, you know, A, how much freezer space you have, and B, what the volume is, what your volume is. Because when you're looking at sandwiches for buffets, when you're looking at sandwiches for big functions, stuff like that, then it's always nice to have a good variety. You just don't want to have like the white and the brown. I mean, you could, depending on your budget, you could, but if you throw in another color in there, or you throw in a wrap, or you throw in a bagel or something like that, it's going to, you know, just sort of give eye appeal, you know, choice, selection. There you go. So we're going to look at some different types of sandwiches. So a simple sandwich, okay? A simple sandwich, there'll be a question on the quiz about this, is right here, top left, a simple sandwich. There you go. 2 pieces of bread. It's got some meat in there. Looks like some cheese and some lettuce. Very simple. Here, egg salad, classic simple sandwich. Okay. On the bottom, underneath, are wraps made with tortillas, obviously. And tortillas are, again, very versatile. You can put almost anything in there. You can take them. You can eat the tortilla just like plain like that. You can panini press it. You know, you can fold it together, make like a wrap, and panini press it. So, and then here are your open face sandwiches. Here, number 3, your open face sandwiches right here. Okay, so open face sandwiches are only simple. They're only 1 piece of bread. There's 1 piece of bread on here, right? Then you have obviously probably a spread, a meat, a cheese, and a garnish, right? Some of these. Then the next slide, we're going to look at a multi-decker, which is also known as like a clubhouse. And then we're going to look at some tea sandwiches. Okay, there we go. There's your multi-decker, the classic clubhouse sandwich, right? Classic clubhouse sandwich, probably very popular in a lot of places. You know what? But it's depending on where it is, you know what? Depending on where it is, there's usually smothered. This one only has, like, I mean, and it varies so much. Some people use 3 layers, some people use 2 layers, some people just take the crusts off. It's just there's no real rhyme or reason. But I think the clubhouse is not the healthiest because a lot of times it's made with iceberg lettuce, butter, mayonnaise, or both, bacon, you know. So there you go. Not the healthiest. Here are the tea sandwiches. Tea sandwiches are usually fairly simple sandwiches made with the Pullman. So I didn't explain this. These long ones here, these are known as a Pullman. the Pullman loaf right here, the basic sort of the white bread, the Wonder Bread, I guess you would call it. There you go. Tea sandwiches are classically served with afternoon tea, like the English afternoon tea. These are tea sandwiches. They have the crust removed, and they're smaller. They're usually cut into, not triangles, but they're cut into strips or squares. And they're smaller. So you have them with your afternoon tea, they're a small piece of tea, and you have your scones and your little petit fours and stuff like that with your tea. So we're gonna keep going with the types of sandwiches. There's hot sandwiches. Okay. Hot sandwiches meaning a simple hot sandwich, you know, where you can put something hot in there. A hot sandwich here. This is a panini, a grilled sandwich, a panini. There's open face sandwiches. The open face hot sandwich, also known as a tartine, which is French. Obviously, it has one layer of bread. You'd put something hot on there, like you could have a piece of chicken breast cut up or a piece of fish, something like that. Deep fried sandwiches. The deep fried sandwiches sounds not the healthiest, but anyways, you look at the burritos, quesadillas, enchiladas, sort of the Mexican food, and yes, the pizza is classified as a sandwich.
Chef, what's an example of a deep fried salad or sandwich?
Deep fried, the Monte Cristo, even though sometimes it's pan fried.
Okay, understood.
Pan fried, something like that. But let me think of another example of the deep fried, give me a second to think of that.
Empanada, maybe?
Croque monsieur?
Yeah, the croque monsieur, like it's flexible. Some people deep fry that, some people pan fry. The croque monsieur is also very similar to the Monte Cristo, a little bit, maybe for ham and cheese.
Reuben sandwich.
No, the Reuben, let me go back up to, where are we here? The Reuben would be like a simple hot sandwich. Okay. Mm-hmm. The Reuben is, from what my understanding, I might differ from yours, but the Reuben is usually like a pastrami, served on like a rye bread with sauerkraut, and they put cheese on there too. I think Swiss cheese, something like that. But usually a lot of times that the Reuben is, you know, either the meat's hot, or like in a deli, they would slice the meat hot. The meat would be in a steamer. They bring it out and they'd slice it. Same with corned beef too. Same with corned beef, like the old school deli, they have everything served hot. The corned beef is actually sliced to order hot. So
is a Monte Cristo classically deep fried?
No, I don't. I've seen it deep fried, but usually the Monte Cristo, it's a ham and cheese. And
right, I know what it is.
And they dip it in egg. But I think like the burrito could be deep fried. Could be the burrito could be deep fried. I'm trying to think of another one. It might come to me. So we get to the pizza. And is the pizza a sandwich? I'm not sure how the Italians feel about that, the traditional Italians, but technically it's an open face sandwich. Okay, technically, I'm just going to look something up here. I'm just Googling something. Deep fried sandwich. Give me 1 second here. Okay. Okay, so there's the pizza. So the key points. So they have, for deep fried sandwich, they have the Monte Cristo. They have the Monte Cristo. What else do they have? That's all they have, really. Come on, give me a second here. Let me.
Yeah, that's all I see here too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So.
And my daughter, who just finished her culinary school, she said on one of her exams, it was asked, is pizza a sandwich? And she said that, yes, it is.
You get it right, or?
Yeah, she said it was on her exam, and yes, she got it right. So, yeah.
That's good, yeah. I don't know how they classic the traditional Italians, but, hear us in Canada / North America.
Especially if it's New York style and you fold it in half.
Yeah. So the key points for sandwiches, obviously, and we're making sandwiches, whether you're making, like 6 sandwiches for a service or like 60 sandwiches for a buffet or a banquet or something like that. So your mise en place, your station setup is really, really popular, is most important. you obviously, the best case is to make the sandwich the same day, but you prep your mise en place the day before, right? This is something I wrote here. I have, because I had a couple bad, one really bad experience where all these they were people from the Caribbean, and they weren't, I don't know, it wasn't religious, like they weren't Muslims or Jewish, but they didn't want pork, and it was just horrendous. So anyways, I would avoid pork products, right? You know, yeah. If you want to do a ham and cheese sandwich for like a buffet, well, you could get a smoked turkey or something. So that's what I always did, right? So I avoid pork products, you know, just to appease more of the mass. And you obviously want more vegetarian to appease the mass too. Popular, I found, this is my opinion, the most popular sandwiches are like an egg salad, a mayonnaise based, a tuna salad, a mayonnaise based, a roast beef, you know, done with cheddar or something like that. A chicken is obviously, and you got to make sure you have your vegetarian in there, right? Vegetarian is good. Is for vegetarians, wraps are always good. Like you could cook a bunch of mushrooms off and do wraps, or you could, you know, grill some vegetables, some peppers, some eggplants, or zucchini or something like that, and julienne it up. You know what? And then obviously must have is vegetarian, like I mentioned, and then vegetarian and gluten-free. You know what? And gluten-free. So, and then obviously you want the proper setup for A, efficiency, and B, sanitation to avoid the cross-contamination. And something that's important is portion control and proper storage. So when you get into portion control, you go to a deli or something like that, you know, people use the scoops. They use the numbered scoops that we talked about in like the first week. You know, they use those portion control scoops. Or what I've always done when I've done sandwiches for a restaurant or something like that, and they're more expensive items, I get them weighed out. You want them weighed out. Because, you know, let's say your cost is, you know, for 3 ounces of corned beef on a sandwich. And then all of a sudden, if you put 2 ounces in, then, you know, people are going to say, oh, this sandwich, I'm getting ripped off here. Or they're going to say, this sandwich is not filling. But then you put 4 ounces in, and your cost is going all across the board too, right? So portion control is good. And then obviously proper storage, right? Proper storage. You know, make your sandwiches, if you can, the same day, if you can, and then wrap them up with saran wrap. Keep it fresh, keep the air out of there, the oxygen, stuff like that, okay? So, obviously here is the types of bread. We looked at some already. Pullman, as I showed you the picture, the Pullman or the sandwich loaves of white bread and whole wheat are most frequently used for simple sandwiches, okay? There we go. White bread is suitable for largest varieties of fillings because of its neutral flavor. And I still think people probably like white bread. I don't know, maybe things have changed a bit more than whole wheat. So there's your varied types. The same picture, that same pictures I had before. The top row is multigrain. Top going from left to right. All right. Then you go. You got your marble rye, your pumpernickel, a raisin swirl here. So that's just types of bread that you can use. Anyways, again, there's different types of bread. I won't go through all of these here. There we go. Storage. Okay. As I mentioned before, daily delivery or delivery as frequent as possible. Keep the bread tightly wrapped in moist-proof wrapping until it's used. That's after you make it. You want to wrap it up. Okay. French bread or other hard crust bread should not be wrapped in saran wrap, but you should put it in some sort of paper. Okay. Otherwise, the crust will soften. You know, store your bread at room temperature, away from the hot places. Okay. If bread must be kept more than 1 day, it may be frozen. Okay. And here's the thing. Day-old bread is very good for toasting. You know, how many people go in you know, realistic times, how many people go out and they go out and they buy bread every day? So, you know, if bread's 2 or 3 days out of your house, you put it in the toaster, it'll taste, you know, it'll taste just like, you know, fresh. Not fresh, it's because it's toasted, but it won't taste stale is what I'm trying to say here. There you go, a bit more types of bread, a bit more storage of bread. Okay, here's the spreads. The purpose of a spread is to protect the bread from soaking up the moisture from the filling that would be used. The spread also adds flavor and moisture. So your types of spread, you have butter, mayonnaise, and again with the mayonnaise, I think it's important to use pasteurized eggs. Other spreads such as pate or liverwurst, right? Here's some vegetarian spreads. Hummus is a vegetarian spread. Tapenade made of olives. Guacamole. The one thing with the guacamole, it will oxidize. Then, you know, you have some cream cheese, jam, peanut butter and jelly, peanut butter and jam. There you go. Then the types of bread, your types of spread. I know I've mentioned this before with the compound butters. Like the butter should be soft enough to spread easily without tearing the bread. So if you have this, if you got to use whatever, if that's why mayonnaise is preferred, right? Mayonnaise is often preferred to butter as a spread because it contributes more flavor. However, the butter has a better shelf life, especially being at room temperature. But if you have to make a compound, like a mayonnaise, a compound butter, if you have to make a compound butter, what you want to do if you're making it tomorrow on Friday, you take the butter out before you go home on Thursday. Leave it at room temperature. Okay, leave it at room temperature because it'd be extremely hard to make a compound butter with the butter's hard. Okay, you want that butter soft, and then it's soft, it's room temperature. You take what you're going to put in there. Let's say it's mustard, let's say it's horseradish, let's say it's fresh parsley, and then it'll just you can just mix it up, no problem. Mix it up with a spoon. If it's hard, you're gonna have to cut it up. You don't want to melt it because you just can't melt it. The milk solids will separate and all this other stuff. Then when you do, you make a numberless amount of sandwiches or something like that, or you're making sandwiches, right? Even if it's just a simple butter, take it out the night before. Take it out the night before because you want to make sure it's spreadable. If butter is hard, you ever put hard butter on bread, you're gonna tear the bread. Okay, you're gonna tear the bread and stress yourself out. Okay. There we go. Meats and fillings. Sorry, fillings, meats and poultry. Sliced meats dry out and lose flavor. So I would suggest, it says avoid slicing farther ahead than necessary, but you can slice the day before or even 2 days before. Just keep them wrapped up. Keep them wrapped up, and not just sort of wrapped up, you put them in stacks of however much and then wrap it up in individual stacks, okay? And then here is where your meat slicer really comes in handy. Thin meat slices are more tender and sandwiches made with them are easier to eat. Okay, so that's where you need a meat slicer. Okay, however, I saw an email today about just reminding where I work about reminding people the meat slicer wasn't cleaned, and you know what? So I'm not sure if you remember that Maple Leaf, the listeria at Maple Leaf. I would say 10 years ago, maybe, where a couple people died. Maple Leaf Foods. That all boiled down to the meat slicer wasn't properly cleaned. Now, however, their meat slicer in a plant like Maple Leaf is probably the size of a car, but anyways, it wasn't properly cleaned. Bacteria grew, the listeria, and then people, I think maybe it might have been 12 years ago now. Anyways, so then there's cheese. The most popular types of cheese are usually cheddar, cheddar, Swiss, provolone, mozzarella. Processed cheese, yes, you can use processed cheese. It's cheaper, but if you looked at the ingredients of the processed cheese, you might kind of avoid that. Cream cheese is soft, goes great with certain things, especially bagels or mascarpone, a bit more expensive, or you want to make a spread with cream cheese and maybe some dill for fish, or maybe some parsley or something like that, right? Some herbs. It'll have color, it'll have a bit more flavor. And then fish and shellfish. Fish and shellfish, the most seafood fillings for the sandwich are highly perishable and should be kept well chilled. So obviously, I already mentioned the tuna bound with mayonnaise. You can do the same thing with shrimp. You bound it with mayonnaise so it's a bit easier to eat. It doesn't fall over the place. You can put fried fish, like the po' boy, the New Orleans po' boy, fried fish in a sandwich, like sardines, anchovies, right? Smoked salmon with the bagel with the lox, right? So, okay. Or you can actually, these are bound salads or whatever. That's the ones based with mayonnaise too. Tuna, egg, like a chicken salad bound with mayonnaise, or turkey. That's very good too. Or you can bump it up and do it like a curry chicken. You can do a curry chicken salad, curry chicken wrap, something like that. Ham. It's good for using leftovers, especially when you're mixing with the mayonnaise. So then you want to talk about vegetable items, right? Vegetable items. Lettuce, tomato, or onions are indispensable in a sandwich. Onions, I would do pickled onions if you can. Avoid raw onions. If you can't avoid the raw onions, then either just soak the raw, thinly slice it and soak it in water for just a little bit, just take out the harshness. Nearly any vegetable used in salads may also be used in sandwiches. Grilled vegetables are popular not only in vegetarian sandwiches, but also part as fillings in meat sandwiches. Grilled vegetables, eggplant, zucchini, peppers, stuff like that. So, and then we look at meat and poultry. Okay, ideally it says to slice very thin. Cheese is also something you want to slice relatively thin, not as thin as meat, but relatively thin on a meat slicer too, right? On a meat slicer too. When you slice cheese, if you're doing big bulk things, you always start with the lighter cheese and then you move to the colored ones. So then what you want to do is you slice your mozzarella, your white, your mozzarella, your provolone, and then you slice your cheddar. Okay, then you slice your cheddar. However, you're going to do your cheese first, then your meats, or you do your meats first, then your cheese, however in order you do it. Before you switch from one to the other, meats to cheese or cheese to meats, you must wash down and sanitize the meat slicer, okay? Fish and shellfish, highly perishable, should be well chilled, as we talked a bit about it. Okay, we talked about mayonnaise. I think this is just repeating what I said already. Making sandwiches, already preparing ingredients before assembly, arrange or store ingredients for maximum efficiency, use the correct sanitation, clean station, and clean tools and equipment. Meaning if you're using one of those spreaders or you're using a scoop, you don't want to use the same scoop for tuna as you do for egg, obviously to avoid cross-contamination. If someone's got a dairy allergy, someone has a dairy allergy and they don't want to eat the eggs, but they want the tuna, There we go. And then we look at the holding temperatures, okay? Holding the temperature at which product is kept for service for storage, okay? We want to keep it out of the danger zone, which I keep saying probably every week. You keep hot food hot, you keep cold food cold. If you have hot sandwiches and you're in a restaurant, well, obviously you make the sandwich hot and you serve it right away. But if it's a buffet style, right? If you're doing wraps or paninis or something like that, grilled panini, grilled wrap, something like that, or even doing something like a Monte Cristo or something like that, you want to keep that in a buffet or a steam table, okay? Chafing dish, something like that. If you're doing something with seafood, if you can, put it on ice. There is your chafing dish. Obviously, pour hot water from at least the coffee machine, hot water from at least where you make tea, the hot water spout in your coffee machine, but it's probably even better if you boil it. There you go. Okay, we talked about sanitation already. We talked about portion control, two very important things. And we're just coming to the end here. Here's something critical points. All sandwiches should be served on cold plates unless they're hot sandwiches, okay? You work clean and as efficient, clean as you go. Have sharp knives, okay? That way, and you weigh all ingredients correctly and bring a scale. You do it like that. There is your breading, okay? And that is your standard breading. I should actually have these reversed here, but that's okay. That is your standard breading procedure. Obviously flour, then egg, then breadcrumbs, and then a pan to hold it with. And the key thing with that is no matter, especially if you're doing volume of breading, it's always good to have two people. It's always good to have two people doing that, because otherwise if one person does it, they're going to get it all dirtier. They're going to make a mess. They're going to get their hands crossed. The hand's going to be like their handle, after a bunch, their hand will be breaded. Okay, their hand will be breaded and just make a mess. So, okay, there is a way to bread food where you use one hand for wet, one hand for dry, and I've done that, but I still always cross it over, and sometimes you just get there. Okay, so that's sandwiches, that's hors d'oeuvres, and that's salads. And what we want to look at now is the charcuterie. We want to look at the charcuterie. Okay, there we go. We have any questions right now? No questions? Okay, so the charcuterie, for only having two questions, I have a lot of slides, so I'm not going to read all this. I'm not going to read all of this, but the charcuterie is, here's what the National Occupational Analysis says. Charcuterie consists of techniques for preserving meats. Okay, it dates back, it's just similar to the garde manger, right? You know, when there was no refrigeration. Sausages are prepared in many varieties. They can be aged, dried, smoked, and cured, wrapped and unwrapped. Other meats processed in charcuterie may include drying meats, air-dried beef, air-dried ham, bacons, pâtés, savory meat fillings. Like, it's endless, right? They are baked and served hot or cold. Traditional terrines are a loaf of coarse force meat covered, barded. That means fat inserted, and cooked with no pastry. So, if you look at this, the question will be, if people say, "What is a terrine?" Right? What's the difference between a terrine and a pâté? Classic definition: a pâté is something that is with pastry. A pâté comes with pastry, usually obviously enclosed, wrapped in pastry. A terrine, there is no pastry. A terrine is a loaf of coarse force meat. The force meat is ground meat. Obviously, it can be a variation of ground meat, can be a mixtures of ground meat, like beef and pork or chicken, stuff like that, right? Even fish too. So the force meat is a ground meat, and it's usually covered, sometimes with fat. Barding means they actually insert fat, usually with a needle, and cooked with no pastry. Terrine has no pastry. Pâté has pastry, and the classic pâté is called the pâté en croûte, you know, in pastry. So there is a whole bunch of different charcuterie types of pâté we're going to cover, which we already looked at, types of pâté and types of terrines, mousselines. We're going to look at some different binding agents. We're going to look at the pâté, terrine, and sausage components. We're looking at some components on salts, casings for making sausages. Okay, terrine molds, food processors, smoking. There we go. So, charcuterie. As we talked about earlier, charcuterie is becoming more and more popular because a lot of people are interested. You know, people that are more interested in using local food, more interested in using the whole, you know, the whole animal, right? Usually the whole animal gets used anyways, you know, like the pig, the pork. You know what they do with the skin of the pork? I mean, they make footballs, right? They make footballs. That's one of the reasons that, like old school, it was called the pig skin. I mean, and obviously cows, they make leather, jackets, belts, everything like that. So, charcuterie originally developed before the advent of refrigeration, just like the garde manger. Charcuterie is a cooking method devoted to preserving meat. Charcuterie translate to mean cooked flesh. However, in modern kitchens, it encompasses a very broad definition of cooked. So sort of like they're bastardizing it. They're using a broader division than they would classically, okay? Traditionally, the responsibility of the garde manger, right? Charcuterie's cold preparation requires a lot of experience and strict adhere to important food safety principles, especially when you get into aging and drying. Charcuterie includes sausages, pâtés, and terrines. Okay, sausages, pâtés, and terrines. I had a friend in high school. He was Italian, and they like classic Italian is they had the upstairs kitchen in their house, and their house wasn't that big, but they had the upstairs kitchen in the house, which was only when company came over. Then they had the downstairs kitchen and a table, and that's where they did it. That's where they ate every day. That's where when they preserved the tomatoes, you know, and that. And then they also had a cold cellar, and in the cold cellar, his dad, like it was very old school Italian. His dad would have hanging like prosciutto. He would have prosciutto and certain types of sausage. I was a teenager. I thought it was gross actually, because I never saw any of that. Right, I was like a waspy mungy cake kid. So they had all that. I thought that was kind of gross actually. I wish if I'd known then what I knew now. Then anyways, and then it was, so the dad did all that. The dad made the wine. He made the prosciutto and the sausages, the salami and stuff like that. And then the mother, she obviously cooked all the meals. She did all the cooking and cleaning and all the other stuff that it was, you know, pretty old school. And then she did a lot of preserving. Actually, when it came time to preserving, like families would get together, 2 or 3 families, you know, cousins and uncles and stuff like that. And yeah, but then still it was mostly women that did that, right? So the men would get together, but they would drink wine and brag, I guess, probably brag about their salami. So anyway, so that is their history. A little bit about that. So different types of charcuterie are smoking different types of sausages and meats. If you look at something like pastrami, that's a way. That's cured meat that's smoked, you know, served in delis. Dry aging, fermenting sausages, canning, freezing. Okay, so, and here's a bit about more. I'm not going to go. There's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of slides, a lot of information on here. I'm just going to focus on a few, on what's more for the exam. Okay, so we look at salting, brining, and curing. Okay, foods that are protected from the growth of bad bacteria. Okay, why are they curing it? You know, before refrigeration, why did they brine food? Why did they cure it from bacteria growth? Right. So salt, right? A lot of things are cured and brined with salt. The sodium chloride, which is salt, preserves the food through osmosis. Put more simply, salt dehydrates the meat. So that is a reason why I totally believe if you're going to marinate something, you're going to marinate some meat, right? Then I've really never really seen it that often. Really, very, very few, is that when you marinate something for 2 hours, 4 hours, overnight, 12 hours, 24 hours, then you don't put salt in there because it dries it out, right? So dehydrates, takes the moisture out. Because all bacteria needs water to live. Making an effort to remove water through osmosis will inhibit microbial growth, okay? A brine, if you remember we did this week 3, I think it was, a brine is a solution of salt and sugar. Okay, meat can be cured using brines as well. Corned beef, pastrami, pea meal bacon are all good examples. Brine products need to be refrigerated. So you're brining your corned beef, your pastrami. We talked about brining the turkey at Christmas time, Thanksgiving time. They still need to be, you're submerging in the brine liquid, but you still need to refrigerate it. Curing meat is a method of preserving that combines salt, sugar, and nitrates. Curing meat predates refrigeration and modern synthetic preservations. It's a dry mixture of combining sodium chloride and sodium nitrate. Okay, and I'm sorry, my slides are getting fading. Okay, or potassium nitrate. Okay, so that's about curing. Okay, and then we have confit. So you might think of classically confit. Like confit really means like cooked in its own fat. So confit literally means to preserve. It is described by chefs as the process of cooking something slowly in fat. So when you cook it slowly in fat, it is usually a less tender working muscle. So the same, it's moist heat. It's, you know, similar, it is moist heat because you're using obviously called fat, but it is obviously the same as braising, right? So traditionally with confit, duck confit is probably the most classic dish, but people do with other animals too and other parts. But the duck legs are the working muscle. So that you cook that low and slow, and it's completely covered in fat, okay? Chefs started confit by first curing the proteins. So the duck legs are first cured. I use sugar and salt is what I do, okay? With the addition of the aromats. The aromats can be, most likely, you could put some juniper berries in there, maybe some peppercorns, some fresh thyme, fresh rosemary. The product is then rinsed. So you're curing this product from anywhere from 12 to 24 hours, let's say. The product is then rinsed and slowly cooked in its own fat. If the fat cools and hardens around the product after pasteurization of the food, it has the benefit of being sealed, right? So if you look at this picture here, the fat, obviously, the duck fat, if you're using that kind of fat for duck confit, you usually use duck fat, and it's very versatile. They're very available because the ducks are very fatty animals. Once this hardens, okay, once this cools down, goes in the fridge, this will harden. And if it is completely covering the duct, then the oxygen won't get in, okay? It's a way to preserve it. And then you have canning. Canning involves the pasteurization and packaging of food in an airtight container. See the picture of the can there. Meat is typically canned after having first been brined or cured. Examples of proteins often cured and canned are anchovies, duck livers, corned beef, ham, like it's, you know, for example. So, and then we have air drying, right? Air drying, the most common air dried beef is Brezola. But anyways, freezing and smoking, okay? Freeze drying and smoking. So drying food inhibits the growth of bacteria because you're taking obviously the moisture out. Yeast and mold by removing water. While water can be removed passively through sun drying, i.e. tomatoes, modern kitchens make the use of electric food dehydrators and freeze drying. Okay, freeze drying utilizes the temperature of -50 degrees to cause the sublimation of water from liquid phase to direct gas, okay? Modern kitchens often make use of dried ice or liquid nitrogen, okay? However, freeze drying is more common in commercial food production. Smoking meat helps inhibit the surface growth of harmful microorganisms. However, the smoke does not typically penetrate to the center of the product and is so often combined with other preservations. So you look at smoked salmon, right? You look at smoked salmon, and there are two typical ways to do smoked salmon, either hot smoked or cold smoked. And it's so simple. Not so simple, it sort of speaks for itself. A hot smoked salmon is not the most common one. Cold smoke is the most common one. But the hot smoke, obviously, you cure or brine it. You can do either or. You can, and this is for both hot and cold. So you take your salmon and you put, if you're going to cure it, you would put a mixture of salt and sugar and some aromats again, maybe some coriander seeds or white peppercorns or whatever, some dill. Some people put beets, grated beets. It'll change the color, make it a really deep red color. And then you cure it. You have to cure it, right? You get the moisture out. And you do that, just all depends on the thickness of the salmon. It could be 8 hours, or maybe 12 hours. You know, maybe 24, but I wouldn't go anymore because the more you cure it, the more moisture is coming out and the more dense it'll be. So the same thing. So when you hot smoke, you put it in a hot smoker and the temperature is hot and it comes out like candy, right? The preferred method is cold smoke, where you're still smoking it. You're putting some sort of wood chips or dust on top of hot, let's say coals, or you might have an electric smoker that does it for you, but you're getting smoke in there. You're getting all the smoke in there, but you have ice. You have ice in there or some sort of chilling mechanism, so you do not cook the salmon. Salmon's cured either by the salt or in the brine, and the brine is liquid. So it can be a very similar recipe as the turkey. You know, the brine for poultry, similar like that. You put it in there overnight, depending on how thick it is. And so the salmon's cured. You put the smoke on there for flavor and a little bit of preserving, but you put the smoke on there for flavor, and then you'll have a great product. Okay, so here are some pictures of some different types of charcuterie, dried and cured and fermented. Okay, the making of charcuterie: salting. So dry rub salt draws out the moisture, preventing the bacteria from spoiling the meat. Normally salt based with the addition of other spices. Okay, you look at the prosciutto di Parma. Okay, mixture of salt, pepper, nutmeg, cinnamon, cloves, blah blah blah. Placed in a very dry place with low temperature for like 3 days. So then you wipe off the mixture, cover it again with salt, and allow 8 to 18 months to cure it with age. And that's where I was where I said that my friend from high school, his dad used to do that, right? He would then cover it again with the salt, and it would go in there from 8 to 18 months, right? He had broom handles, and he had the end of the prosciutto. So the prosciutto is the leg. So the leg you're talking about down towards where the shank, the shank is the shank and the trotter and yeah. So he would tie it. So the thin part, he would tie it and hang around these broom handles that hung from his ceiling. It was kind of interesting. Anyways. And then again, it can be done with fish, gravlax, herring, stuff like that. So Where do we want to talk about? I want to go to, sorry. Give me 1 second here. Okay. Okay, there are different types of brining equipment. Okay, so brining equipment with a pump where they inject the brine, and this is done with bigger pieces of meat where they inject the brine, and this can be done with like corned beef too, or they have a machine where the needles here on the one on the right where the needles actually penetrate. They penetrate. That's done a lot with corned beef and pastrami too. So, and also with different types of ham. So here's a wet brine. So back to the brine, they use a wet brine for obviously for this, you know, and there's your brisket. Okay, so the brisket is what is the cut for the corned beef, also for the pastrami, right? They wet dry it and they inject it with one of these tools here. Usually in large manufacturers, they would do something like that. The brisket, and then the brisket, and then the pastrami is but smoked afterwards. So there you go. There's a piece. I gave you the sandwich there so you can see. And then you have hams, different types of hams that are wet brined. Some are smoked. There's your pea-meal bacon. The pea-meal bacon comes from the loin of the pork. It is brined in a solution. And then traditionally, it was covered with crushed, dried yellow peas. And that's where the pea comes from in pea-meal. But now they used to use cornmeal. Okay, traditionally, that's how it's called pea-meal bacon. Okay, you know, and then, so it's been brined, right? So it is preserved, the moisture comes out of it, and then you just either pan fry it or grill it. And then the key with pea-meal is you can't overcook it. It's not like regular bacon. The more you cook it, the more it'll get tough and rubbery, okay? So salt there's different types of salts. There's a little, if you want to see, there's a link about some different types of salts. Ingredients for curing, okay? Right? There's different types of salt, canning salt, kosher salt, okay? There's also pickling salt, okay? Then there's saltpeter, also known as potassium nitrate, right? Preserving rose in color. Apparently they used to give saltpeter to the soldiers in the war, actually, so they wouldn't think about it, so they would just focus. Apparently, as my grandfather told me, he was in the war. He told me that they used to give him saltpeter, so they wouldn't think about women. Anyways, they keep focused, okay? Sodium nitrate, okay? Sodium nitrate, potassium nitrate, those are things that are put in different types of curing, sausages, stuff like that, salami, stuff like that, okay? They have uses for that. Obviously, then there's sugars, added ingredients, spices, acids, seasoning, and sometimes MSG. Okay, there's a bit more. Let me go. We talked about salmon already, okay? There we go. Smoked salmon, we talked about different types of that. We want to talk about force meat. As I mentioned, force meat is a mixture of ground, lean meat, okay? That is usually emulsified with fat. So you have to remember that when you eat sausages, you know, when you eat pâtés, when you eat salamis and stuff like that, cured and stuff like that, there's usually a lot of fat in there, right? You get a lot of fat. A lot of pork is used in this too. Might have a hard time going to the grocery store just to buy a sausage, and I'm sure it's still the most of them. You know, your bratwurst and stuff like that, your hot Italian, your sweet Italian, stuff like that. There are a lot of them are still made with pork products, right? So, okay, so the emulsification can be accomplished by either grinding, sieving, or pureeing the ingredients, right? When the ingredients we talk about is the ground beef, lean meat, and the fat, okay? The emulsification may either be smooth or coarse, depending on the desired consistency of the final product. Force meats are used in the production of numerous items found in charcuterie, such as quenelles, sausages, pâtés, terrines, roulades, galantines. Roulades is something that's rolled up. A galantine there's a galantine and a ballantine. I'm not sure if they're going to ask you this, but a galantine is usually a deboned bird. It's usually a deboned bird, okay, and it is rolled up, okay. Proteins commonly used in the production of force meats include pork. Then you have your fish ones, pike, which is the white fish one, trout or salmon, right? And these have been ground. Seafood, game meats like boar, rabbit, venison, poultry birds, game birds, you know, like pheasant or something like that, veal, and then livers too, pork livers, and also you can throw in chicken livers there too. Pork fat back is often used for the fat portion of a force meat, as it has somewhat neutral flavor. Okay, neutral flavor. So here's some temperatures about smoking. As I mentioned, the cold smoking, that's the temperature you want. You don't, obviously, if you anything, you smoke at a warm or a hot temperature, you're going to affect the texture and you're going to cook it. Okay. Botulism, we talk about bacteria. Botulism attacks the nervous system, appears 12 to 36 hours after eating, depending on a lot of things in your immune system, really. Symptoms are the same as in previous descriptions with the addition of double vision, okay, the respiratory too, and double vision. Bacteria grows in the absence of oxygen in jars, cans, and others, okay? Botulism in jars and cans. That's why they say you shouldn't eat too much canned food. If an outbreak occurs, there's a relatively high death rate. Never taste suspected foods, okay? Only a small can count. So smell it, you know, when in doubt, throw it out. But here's the thing too, and this can be done for not just, we're talking about obviously charcuterie here, we're talking about if you can fruits or vegetables, if you preserve fruits and vegetables in mason jars, okay? You have to know what you're doing. You have to know what you're doing. Research, stuff like that, because you can make someone sick. You can kill someone, really. So, different types of smoked foods. Again, here is, obviously, on the left, smoked salmon. Here's a smoked ham, and here's probably some smoked sausages. Okay, the smoked pork hock. So, obviously, the hock comes from the leg. So here's the leg here. If you go to, I'm thinking that if you go to the left here, that's where the trotter is. The trotter, also known as the foot, right? And then you go up here. This is the leg will be up here on. I'm looking at the right and looking at the way it goes from smaller to bigger, and then that's your leg up there, your pork leg. You know, the pork leg, which has pieces like the inside round, the outside round, which are normally used for schnitzel and stuff like that. So classically French Canadian, there you go. French Canadian is the split Le Habitant pea soup. Green pea, yellow pea, there you go. People, I worked as an apprentice, we put the whole hock in there and it broke down and we use that for flavor. And then we remove the bone and the skin, but all the fat would dissolve, all the meat would dissolve, okay? Not dissolve, it would break down, sorry. Okay. So let's look at pâtés and terrines, okay? By definition, they are baked in an earthenware dish, which is looking one of these two dishes on the bottom here, okay? Pâtés are commonly baked in a crust, okay? They'll be referred to as pâté en croûte. And I think I have a picture on the next slide, don't I? Yes, this is the pâté en croûte. I'll come back to that in a second. So, traditionally an oval shape was used, but in today's industry, a rectangular shape down here is more commonly used to ensure consistent size and shape in portioning. So you look at this oval shape, you slice that, try to get that consistent. You know, the person who's getting that middle slice is obviously getting either way thinner or much more food. So the rectangular is much better for portion control. It should be noted that many kinds of products are called terrines because they are prepared in terrine molds, even if they are not baked. So the example here, this is a vegetable terrine, and it wouldn't be baked. It would be, what it would done is bound together with aspic, okay, with aspic. However, classically, aspic comes from gelatin that comes from animals. So it's kind of, you know, it's like classically old school, the vegetarian sausages. Okay, they're vegetarian sausages, or they're seafood sausages, or they're chicken sausages, or something like that, but they were still served in a pork casing. So the same thing here. You have a vegetable terrine, but it's done in aspic, a gelatin. Now, something like this could be done in agar, right? Something like this could be done in the agar. So here's the pâté en croûte. So what you see in the picture above is gelatin being poured into the pâté. So before, this is already baked. So this is already baked, and this is a terrine, a classic pate terrine mold, and they have little hinges that come up, and the mold will come right down. So they take what this is just a basic, like a piping tube, a plain piping tube from pastry, and they would make the holes like for the vent. So the moisture, just like making a pie, you want to vent it so the moisture comes out, right? They would do that, and after it's cooked, then you pour this aspic in, and it completely seals everything together. Okay. Anyways, this is done to fill any gaps between the pastry and the force meat, because obviously the force meat, as it cooks, it's going to shrink. It's like anything. It's like you're cooking a ground beef, you're cooking a burger. You start off with a burger. Once you cook it, it's going to shrink, right? Okay, so gelatin is a protein obtained by boiling skins, tendons, and ligaments and or bones with water. It is usually obtained from cows or pigs. Gelatin is used as a thickener for fruit gelatins and puddings, such as Jell-O, right? In candies, marshmallows, cakes, ice creams, yogurts. Gelatin is not vegan. However, there is a product called agar-agar that is sometimes marketed as gelatin, but it's vegan, okay? It is diverted from a type of seaweed. So you think about that, all those people that are eating marshmallows and stuff like that for years, they didn't know, they didn't know it came from a pig that's thickened it up. Okay. So we're going to still looking at the force meats and terrines. This is a process of making it. So there is your diced up beef protein. Let's say it's beef. Let's say it's pig, like this. The white, that's your back fat. That's your back fat. So there's two ways to do this. You can obviously grind it here, and see how they're grinding it? They're grinding it on ice. Okay. It's very important when you make a force meat, you make a pate, you want to keep everything as cold as possible. Here's another way they do it. They're putting in a food processor. One way this way, and here's a food processor. Here's like you're making a mousseline, like that. You're using eggs. You can see the eggs in there. Okay, and there you go. A couple other different ways to do it. In the food processor where they're adding cream. Here it is on ice where they're folding in some garnishes. Looks like pieces of ham and some nuts or something, pistachios. Here's where they pass it through a sieve or a tammy. And then they're making it too. And they've taken the pork back fat, and you freeze it and you slice it very thin on this. And you're lining the terrine mold. You're lining the terrine mold with that. And there you go. There's your lined terrine mold this white is back fat. It's the fat. There it is right there. You're putting your force meat in, you're spreading it out, making it nice and even. There it is there. There's the back fat is on top, and they put some aromats, some bay leaf, peppercorns, rosemary, and then they put the lid on, right? And here it is. Again, after it's cooked, this is actually a pate en croûte. So the pate en croûte here, here's a picture of it. So you actually, as you cook this, the meat will shrink down. The meat shrinks down, obviously, and then you fill it with the gelatin. And here, it's not the greatest picture, but you can see the gelatin up here at the top to cover the gap. This covers the gap between the pastry. Again, there's different ways to cook it, but the point number 4 is allow 24 hours before use so that the flavors really develop. Okay. There we go. Another picture. There we go. Here's something about casings, sausage casings. Okay. Okay. No, a lot of times, obviously, they usually come from the pig. A little bit more about casings. I want to kind of speed through this a little bit here. Casings, natural hog casings, or beef or sheep. Okay. There we go. Here are some smoked pork products. So here's the loin of the pig, right? Actually, this one is with the bone in. So this is similar. It's a pork loin, similar, same cut as the female bacon. Okay. But this one's been smoked. It's known as Kassler. Okay. It's a German product. It's, it's smoked pork loin. Here is pastrami. Okay. Here is pastrami with the spices. It's pastrami. It's sometimes made with the eye of the round. I think more of the times it's made with the brisket. Okay, there you go right there. There's your beef pastrami used in sandwiches. Here's some ingredients about making sausages. Okay, and then it's You know, the keys to success. Again, have all your ingredients as cold as possible. You don't want to. There's your sausage machine right there. And I have some pictures. This will end everything up. So that's a Genoise salami. Okay, that is called mortadella. It's an Italian cured meat. Well, so is the salami too, right? I mean, the Italians have done this forever, centuries, right? So curing meat, preserving meat. In the mortadella, the classic mortadella is has pistachios. That's what the green is, the pistachios. The mortadella is what known as the Italian version of bologna, which might be a bit. This is another type. I'm not sure exactly. With some type of salami. You know what? This is called right here. Is called head cheese. Okay, it's a classic garde way. It's called head cheese, and what you do is you take the whole head of a pig, and you boil it up, and you take everything out, and it's set in gelatin. So this is like the pâté en croûte is set in gelatin. Okay, this is a Scotch egg, so it's a hard-boiled egg, and then they put a force meat around it. Usually pork, and then they bread it. So the word Scotch, meaning comes from Scotland, also popular also again, and also in England too. So yeah, it's a hard-boiled egg, force meat, breaded, deep fried. Sort of, there's a more modern twist on that where they actually, one of two things, they only cook the egg a lot less. They cook the egg, instead of cooking it for like 8 to 9 minutes for a hard boil, they only do it like 4 to 5 minutes, and then they bread it and then they fry it. Or a lot of times, sometimes they're doing it more modern, is they use a quail egg. Again, a quail egg. If you undercook the egg and you slice it, then at least the yolk has still got some runniness to it. And that's it. That is it for the garde manger for week number, what are we in? Week number 7 and charcuterie. Okay, so what do we have for questions here? It's 10:50.
Were you going to cover like the condiments and accompaniments, or there's not much to really cover there, right?
I'll send you a slide on. I'll send you some information on the condiments and accompaniments. Because yeah, you know what? There's a couple good things. There's stuff on Cumberland sauce and chutneys and stuff. So I'll send you that. Okay, accompaniment. Let me write this down. Okay. So again, please, I'll give you another briefing of what we talked about at the beginning for next week. So next week being our last week. What I'll do is I'm going to try to do it tomorrow night. I'll send you. I'm going to send it in three sort of batches, right? In three separate emails. I will send you all the PowerPoints for week number 8. All the PowerPoints for week number 8, which is all the pastry. There's PowerPoints on pies and pastries. On what else is there? Frozen mousses and meringues, everything I showed you from the first, I will send all that to you. There's a fair amount of information on that. I will also send you all the quizzes with the answers. Okay, all the quizzes. I sent you the one from last week's answers. So then you'll have the whole thing as one Excel folder, one Excel workbook too. Then I'm going to send you, actually I'll do it in 4 things. Then I'll send you the review week. And I think the review week, I want to go over the review week. And then I'm going to send you a sort of a learning, it's a quiz, it's a test / learning for all the pastry and baking. Okay, for all the pastry and baking, because we won't have time to go through all of that. And as I said, someone was a bit worried, but for myself too, that's not my strength really, is the baking and pastry, the baking and pastry. So I found this exam test learning thing. I think this is going to be very good. I'm going to break it down to all the different areas, and I think that'll be really good. Okay. And then that'll be it. Then next week will be the last week for everything. So anything more about this week? Okay.
Sorry, Jeff, I got a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So can a pâté be a spread?
Yeah, well, like if we look back to the classical definition of the pâté, the
Right.
pâté is usually defined, and they'll say this in the exam. The pâté is something that's done in pastry. So So you have something beautifully done in pastry, yes. But the term goes interchangeably, you know, sometimes it's bastardized. What would be good as a spread is like chicken liver or liverwurst, something made with a liver. But if you're going to take the time to make a pate, right? Like that one where you have the pastry and then you're pouring the gelatin. I don't know if you want to spread that on bread. I don't know if you want to spread that. That's something you would serve on a platter as a buffet, or something you'd serve as an appetizer, an appetizer with some accompaniments, some red currant jelly or something like that. And the same could be said for the terrine too. If you're making that terrine, you saw the terrine that had the back fat in it, and then you're taking all this time to do the force meat, right? You're taking all the time, you're taking the force meat, you're grinding it. Sometimes they grind it twice, coarse and then finer. And then you're grinding it, putting it on ice, or you're taking the time, putting it in a RoboCoupe. I don't know if you want to do that. You're spending this time in the terrine. That's something, again, that would be served as an appetizer. But if you want to spread, an easier spread would be like a chicken liver, where you could either do it two ways. I think the easier method of doing chicken liver is where you sear the livers till they're like medium rare, and then you actually buzz them up in a food processor. Some people then do that. Then they saute some onions, something like that. They deglaze it with brandy or something like that. They put some cream in there. Or there's another way, the chicken liver, the way they bake it, same thing in a water bath, but they do everything raw. They buzz up the livers raw, and they mix it with eggs, and they cook it in a bain-marie water bath, and it sets. But I think probably the easiest, in chicken liver, I think chicken liver sauteed, chicken liver, like you're making a chicken liver mousse, where you're searing them off, like I said, and you're putting in a RoboCoupe with some cream. I think that is pretty common. I think that's something that's gastropub food, right? Something that you'd eat, some gastropub food with some baguettes or something like that. So maybe some pickles, so I think something like that you could spread. And I think something like that is fairly trendy right now too, right? So I guess charcuterie is trendy too, but I think sort of like gastropub food. The Scotch egg is sort of what we mentioned there, is a very sort of traditional sort of gastropub thing.